Today in this video, I'm going to share the two cycles that impact human life so that you can understand how two people can read the same book, watch the same podcast, get the same tools, and one person excels and ascends, and the other person remains the same year after year. I'm sure many of us have always wondered, why does this always happen? Now, most people will say this is a discipline issue or some type of motivation or inspirational issue, or some people say you have the wrong mindset. But I want to submit to you that it's going to be a little bit deeper than those things, although those things are important. Now, this is going to be taken from Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 with the Abraham story. For those of you who have already been on my channel, you see that I have the 3 layers of transformation where I talk about what God told Abraham to leave. He told him to leave his country, his kindred, and his father's house. I'm actually going to put up a link here if you want to go into detail each of those layers. There's so much good insight and revelation that you would want to know as a foundation before you even watch this video. But it's okay. You can stay here and continue. Now, what I want you to understand is that each layer is from the external to the internal layers of a person. So the country aspect is the most external. It is your environment. The kindred has to do with your relationships. That's where it's like the bridge between external and internal parts of you. And then you have the father's house, which is your most internal layer, most sacred layer of who you are. And as I began to look at this, I'm like, wait a minute, there's a pattern here. It's not just 3 layers that you need to leave in order to transform to become the Abraham version of you. I said there's a pattern here, a cyclical pattern. And I realized that there's 2 cycles that we need to talk about concerning your environment, your identity, and your relationships. Now, the first cycle that I want to call it the cycle of formation. So we're going to take these 3 layers and we're going to understand them in terms of the cycle of formation. The cycle of formation, all that is you understand how someone becomes who they are. This is the cycle that forms the current version of you, right? And so how does this work? So it starts with your identity. It starts with the image that you have of yourself. It's your self identity, your self-image of who you think you are, or who you believe yourself to be. And from that place, that's where you attract and create relationships that are connected to how you see yourself. And then that's how it connects with how you see others. And then because you have those relationships that you're constantly engaging in, guess what happens? You create an environment. Right? And then your environment reinforces the identity that you have. This is the cycle of formation. And if you're not careful, mind you, this cycle isn't a bad thing because you can have a great identity of how you see yourself. You can have great relationships. You can have an awesome environment, and that reinforces your identity, and you grow and you expand and you become a better version because of those type of relationships and environments that you're in. So the cycle in and of itself isn't bad. But what happens when you have a bad identity? You have a poor view of how you see yourself, how you see others, and the way you live. And imagine that being the cycle of formation. Imagine that being a prison that is a constant loop, I'll give you an example, right? I was a part of a ministry. I mentioned this probably already. And I was in a cycle of formation. I had a certain identity of how I saw myself. Therefore, I was in that community, that church, right? Relationships were there, environment was there, and was reinforcing who I was. But there's a second cycle that I was implementing during that time that allowed me to see more than where I was. And I had a dream that, long story short, pretty much showed me that the environment I was in and the relationships that I had was a prison. So the very same environment that was actually helping me, that was to grow, to develop, to become who I was at the time, now became the very cycle that was going to prevent me from going on to the next level, right? So the cycle of formation can be a good thing and a bad thing depending on where you are in your life experience. So it doesn't matter how disciplined you are sometimes or how much motivation and inspiration you have. If you're still caught in the same prison that is producing or reinforcing the same identity that you have, then you won't be able to continue on your journey to become Abraham because you're stuck in that cycle. And this is where the second cycle comes in. This is where God gave Abraham the second cycle, what I call the cycle of transformation. Now, notice in Genesis chapter 12, God didn't start with Abraham's identity. Just like I told you within the cycle of formation, it starts with your identity. It starts with your most internal part of how you see yourself, right? But God didn't start there. Right? God didn't start in the most sacred, the most vulnerable aspect of Abraham. He first started with his living situation. He said, get out of your country, your environment, right? Because your environment is what's reinforcing the current version of you. Right? So in order to even get to the most inner parts of you, you got to leave the very surroundings that has shaped your habits, that has shaped the way you view yourself and others, the way you view reality. Get out of that environment that is constantly feeding the current version of you, right? So get out. Now, once you get out of that environment, it's going to be a lot easier. I'm not saying there won't be any challenges, but once you get out of the environment, then you can begin to remove relationships, right? You begin to remove those relationships, right? Because those relationships that you were in were creating the environment that you were living in, which was reproducing the very essence of who you were or are at the time. So once you remove those relationships, now you can go to the third layer, your identity. Start to really look at the thoughts and the emotions concerning how you see yourself, because you've removed the two layers that are reinforcing that identity. And that's the cycle of transformation. So it's not only just about discipline, but what type of discipline are you in terms of your cycle? Because you could be very disciplined, but you're in the cycle of formation. Or you could be very disciplined and you could be in the cycle of transformation. You can be very motivated and inspired. You could have vision, but you're still locked in to the previous version of yourself. So I just want you to understand that these three layers impact human life. But I realized in the Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 verse, I realized that it was more than just three layers. It was these two cycles. So this is what I want you to understand. And we're going to keep talking about these three layers. And next video, I'm going to give you more insight on how alignment culture now is going to be an environment that is going to help you go from cycle of formation, which, like I said, in and of itself isn't bad. But if you're trying to go to the next level and you're stuck in that cycle of formation, then it becomes a loop, a prison loop, right? But alignment culture is created to cultivate aligned individuals to go on their journey of transformation, to tap into the cycle of transformation. So you leave your old environments, leave your old relationships, and so that you can be engulfed into alignment culture, which is a new environment that's going to help you to give you a new perspective, new relationship, new understanding of self, of source, and each other. And that's how we can grow and develop a culture of people who are in alignment with who they are meant to be and what they are meant to do. Because aligned, watch this, and I'm going to close with this. Aligned people create aligned families. Aligned families create aligned communities. Aligned communities create aligned nations, and aligned nations change the world. And I firmly believe that we are in a time where this alignment culture is going to be the very key to create the nation that's going to change the very course of reality in the world today. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for liking it, subscribing. Thank you for your comments, and I will see you in the next video. Peace and love. Thank you for watching. God bless.